Hi, my name is Amanda Oberdick, and in this screencast, I am going to be giving you an overview of a blended learning environment that I have created using Schoology. So my course is titled Oberdick Science for EDT6020. What you're looking at right now is how the screen appears in Schoology. So the first thing that you see is the Remote Learning Daily template. We use this in my district to provide an agenda for students so that they have kind of the same format in all their classes. So it's really a Google slideshow that's been embedded, and then as the unit progresses, you change which slide is up front at the top of the slideshow, and that allows students to see what they should be working on that day. What I have linked in here is actually my teacher's edition of that slideshow so that you could see the whole thing. All right, underneath we have a Meet Your Teacher section where I introduce myself to my students. Below that, in the black folders, we have some getting started information, which includes course objectives, and some general information area, which includes my classroom policies, discussion, collaboration, cooperation policies, my references, and the syllabus. And so all of the materials that I used, I have listed in the references page. So there's where all my sources are cited. I have an Ask the Class discussion board. We use this discussion board for general housekeeping questions, which I outline here, just letting students know that this is not for content related questions. These are more for housekeeping items, kind of like a frequently asked questions spot. Next, we have some general science resources in the white folder. So these are science resources, but they are not topic specific. So you see that I mentioned SEPs and CCCs, which are the science and engineering practices and cross-cutting concepts from the NGSS, or sorry, Next Generation Science Standards that we use in my district and in my state. So this would be a place where I would put things like, for example, right now there are some resources about CER using claim evidence reasoning, and that's where you would continue to put things like how to make models and such. So references for students, important information, but it's not topic specific. So it's something that they want to be able to refer back to throughout the course. Next, I have a red folder, which is labeled troubleshooting or tech help. So anytime students might run into a common problem with their Chromebooks, they can look here to see what I might have provided. And of course, over time, if I have to help a student and I create a screencast to help that student with something, then I can always toss that screencast in here so that in the future, if another student has the same problem there, I have now added that help to the folder so it can grow over time. All right, next in the orange folder, we have beginning of the year activities. So here we have a virtual lab code activity. This is an introductory activity for students, kind of a get to know you. But in the introductory activity, because I do teach science, what they do is they get this virtual lab coat, which is a Google slideshow, and they are given directions on how to complete it, and they decorate this picture, this clip art of a lab coat, using images, drawings, pictures, whatever, in order to kind of let their personality shine. And then they are to use this link to go to a Flipgrid, which Flipgrid is kind of like a video lesson platform where they would then record a short video of themselves where they give us a little bit of background information. This is really helpful to me as a teacher to learn how to say students' names, because that's a little bit of a challenge since many students in the online setting don't speak. And there's a lot of reasons why they don't do that. Sometimes it's tech issues, but there are many students who just never talk. Even in Zoom settings, they always use the chat box. So this gives me an opportunity to hear their voices, see their faces, and also figure out exactly how I should be saying their name, because that's really important to be able to say people's names correctly. So that's their introductory activity. Also in the Flipgrid part, they give clues about which lab code is theirs, and what ends up happening is after everyone has completed the Flipgrid video, I take the submissions from the lab code and I copy paste those into a class slideshow, and then the students are able to view that slideshow, but there's no names attached to each lab coat, so then they try to guess at whose lab coat is whose, and it gives them an opportunity to get to know each other a little bit better too. So once the introductory activity is completed and we've had some time to kind of do some team building, Then we move into the actual content. So this particular unit, I opted to develop my weather unit. The weather unit comes from the TCI program Weather and Climate. It actually consists of 3 units. The first unit, titled Atmosphere and Energy, comes prior to this. Weather is the second unit in the program. So here we go into the blue folder. Here is our weather unit materials. So the first item that they complete is this lesson guide. So in the lesson guide also, there are some directions that kind of give them an overview of everything they need to be doing throughout the entire unit. And then in the lesson guide itself, which is a Google slideshow, they will find their learning target for the lesson. And they also find a step where they create an initial model. Modeling is really important in science, and so all of our units begin with an initial model, and this is a model that they will come back to and revisit throughout the learning, and then they create a final model at the end of the lesson. So here they would create this initial model, and I have a slide where they insert their picture of their initial model in this place. Students can draw their models on paper, or they can use any digital tools that they like to create a model, and then they just need to insert a link or pictures of the models here on this slide. Once they finish that step in the lesson guide, the next item on the list here is an EduFlow application. So I put a note in the page so that you would understand that I did not link my actual EduFlow classes to the assignment in Schoology for this course because I'm using the free version of EduFlow and I have reached my limit in terms of classes. I had enough to create course classes for all 5 sections of science that I teach, but that is the limit. I didn't want to link the EduFlow class because I don't want, the people in my class to then be added to courses that have actual students in them. So in this screencast, I will show you how the EduFlow platform works. So in EduFlow, I have this EduFlow calls them workflows. So in this flow, and of course right now you can see the flow is hidden from students because we haven't actually done this in class yet, although we'll be opening it up to them soon. They have different steps. So in the first step, it says submit your work. So here is where they're going to submit a model that they created of their severe weather. And after they submit their model, then they will go to the peer review step where they are going to review work done by other students. And they're going to do this using a rubric that I put in. So I'm going to go ahead in here and show you this rubric just very briefly. So as the teacher, I am able to set up the rubric and tweak it however I want, to customize it in any way. So of course it starts with mention something that your classmate did well and be specific. And then I have in here elements that come from the rubric that I will end up using to actually grade their models. So they get but it has additional details. So they get a chance to kind of see, okay, we're going to need to make sure that the model includes thermal energy, the atmosphere, air pressure, etc., etc. After they've done 3 reviews, then they get to reflect on the feedback that they received from other students. So in the reflection, that is where they're going to do some goal setting. So let me show you the rubric for the goal setting. So it gives them a chance to say, what did you learn from the feedback you received? And then how do you plan on using that feedback to improve? And I'm able to see all of this. They submit this to me, so then I'm able to offer individualized recommendations to students, maybe next steps depending on how it is that they fill out this rubric and what kind of feedback they received. That enables me to really individualize the activity. They also give a score about how useful the feedback is, and that eventually students will start to kind of see how other people score them on how helpful they're being in their feedback so that they can grow and improve as students. There's also an instructor review step where I also provide feedback, and it's done using the exact same rubric that I used in the other one. And then they get to reflect on my feedback as well. So that's an overview kind of how the EduFlow process works. So this is the activity where they're going to be doing the goal setting and setting goals for their learning throughout the unit. The lesson guide with the initial model also provides a kind of a pretest for me. It enables me to take a look at where students are in terms of their ability to create a model, as well as where they stand with their understanding of weather, or the content, whatever the topic happens to be. So it provides me almost like a pretest. Also, throughout the unit, throughout each lesson, there is some kind of assessment step. And these are really formative assessments. This air pressure and wind quiz here, this water and atmosphere quiz. There'll be one in the air masses and changing weather where they will, but it will be created by GimKit, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Severe weather, we use the performance task from TCI, and that's all of those things are formative. Students are able to submit them multiple times to show their understanding and their growth. And then the final summative assessment is both a combination of the final model that they produce in the lesson guide and this test here that's labeled weather test. So in the weather test, they are presented with a series of situations where they are being asked to forecast the weather using a scenario where they are visiting the beaches here in Delaware. So I kind of took some concepts and I tried to make it more personal, more local. So they even use a weather map and use what they've learned to make forecasts about the weather conditions for a week down at the beach. All right, it also asks I need to show that the assessments are created. This was created using Schoology's test quiz. And then all these items are linked in with the grade book. I have used Schoology for assessments for several years now, so I have done this lots and lots of times. So I feel pretty confident in my ability to create those assessments. And Schoology has a lot of really good tools. They have the assessment. They also have, you may have noticed that some of the little quizzes here, like the water and weather one, actually has a different color next to it. That uses Schoology's assessment tool, which is slightly different. It's a little more useful in some ways because it offers some different question types, but it can be a little tricky. It's a little more touchy. Sometimes it's slow to load. So I still rely on the test quiz feature as well, depending on what kinds of questions I'm going to be asking. For example, let's take a look at this quiz. We'll go into the preview step so you can see this is what it would look like to a student. And this right here is an example of one reason why I would use the assessment tool instead of the test quiz, because the test quiz does not have this drag and drop option. In here I was able to insert this illustration of the water cycle and create these choices where they're going to drag and drop these into spaces to label the diagram. So that's something that the test quiz doesn't offer. So I like to use the assessment tool for this. But anytime you use like a draw tool with the assessment, it's very slow to load and it's a little more difficult to grade. So if I'm going to use something that uses more traditional question types like multiple choice and written response, short answer, matching, then I'll use the test quiz just because of the ease of use of that one. So it's important to kind of know your LMS, know the quirks about it, to be able to make choices about which tool you want to use for whatever your purpose might be. Okay, the next thing talks about individual assignments. So we'll talk about some of these little assignments that are within here. One application that I'm using in here is something called Ed Puzzle. So for example, this is the How Heavy is Air Ed Puzzle. And what Ed Puzzle does is it allows you to use videos and then you can insert questions. So let's kind of show. So these little teardrops represent spots in the video where it's going to ask the student a question. It pauses the video and asks them a question. Edpuzzle will not let them turn the video on and walk away and switch over to a different screen, because if you're playing in the Edpuzzle and you switch to a different screen, Edpuzzle stops the video. Also, it will not let them skip ahead. They have to let the video play. So that's convenient. And however, if they get to the question and they feel unsure, they can actually rewatch the section that they just watched. It automatically backs it up to the previous question. So like, for example, if you're here and you're unsure of how to answer that question, you hit the rewatch button, it will take you back to this spot. So you rewatch the section that immediately preceded the question. So that's a pretty nice application. My district pays for the pro version of Edpuzzle. I don't really know what the free version is like, because I was first introduced to Edpuzzle through School PD. So, but if your school has it, it's definitely a great thing to go ahead and use. So that's one example of a type of assignment that I've used in here. Some other examples, there is a screencast here that I produced about air pressure. Another example is using this convection current stations. So the stations are used, basically you take a Google slideshow and you can create stations. I've done that a couple of times here. If you do look in the severe weather when they do the TCI performance task, TCI is our science curriculum, so students have access to the online textbook, and the online textbook has an investigation notebook, so it's got some nice features, but it does rely sometimes on things like handouts. So for this one performance task, there are stations that the students are supposed to move around to in the classroom, and I had to take that information from TCI and turned it into a slideshow where you have links on this first line to take them to the different stations, and it'll bounce them around, and it also added in these links to take them back to the main one. So that's just a way that you can kind of take that classroom station experience and turn it into something that can be accessed virtually. So anytime you see an assignment where it talks about stations, then it's going to be some kind of slideshow where there's links that takes them to different activities. Assignment, I have an activity here in the air masses and changing weather lesson. In here it says go to joinpd.com. So I'm going to be using a Pear Deck activity for this, but I don't have Pear Deck Pro, and it's something that kind of happens real time, so you don't really see this in the Schoology course. I have a brief description here that kind of says here's the directions, but in this screencast I'm going to show you how this activity would work. So Pear Deck uses this flashcard factory activity. So you import a list, or you could create the list from scratch, but I've imported a list from Quizlet. And then once I have my list with definitions, then we'll choose Play Flashcard Factory. And then students would go to joinpd.com, and then they would enter this code. And of course, I don't have any students available right now, but as they join, you would see these, where it says 0 workers joined, you'd see that number go up. And then you would click clock in, and then Pear Deck will sort students into 2 groups. They'll sort them into what they call the day shift group and the night shift group, and it pairs them up with another student. And what I would do is, since it's going to take some time while students are coming in, I would build in a break, and while Pear Deck is shuffling people, I would then create breakout rooms in Zoom to put students into a breakout room with whoever they were partnered with. So then it says let's play, and of course you're seeing it from the teacher side, but the students would be seeing the terms, and they would be creating a flashcard to match the term. So as they finish creating the flashcard for the term, their little image will drop onto this conveyor belt. So multiple teams of students are creating flashcards to go along with the same term. And then once you have completed that step, you go to what's called quality control. And of course, there's no cards here right now because it's not actually being done live. But what will happen is it'll have the term, and then you can scroll through and show the different ones that were created by students. And then you have a class discussion, and students are able to vote on which one they think was best. It's anonymous on this side. They don't know who created which flashcards. Of course, they know which ones were theirs, but they don't know about the other ones. And as a group, they can then select whatever card they felt was the highest quality. And it leads to some really great discussion about what counts as quality and what's useful in a flashcard. And then you select and reject cards until you end up with a nice set of student created flashcards. The next step says shipping. Of course, it says looks like you didn't approve any of the cards, but what you would do is you could print them or you can export to Gimkit Live. So it will give you, you name the set and then you can export it. You get this link and then you can go to the set in Gimkit Live. And then you now have student created cards. Of course, right now what you're seeing is what I created because I didn't go through the process with students, but you would have a set of student created cards and then you can play Gimkit with them. So what I would do is I would then take the student created cards and create a Gimkit Live assignment. And this is how we would kind of do a formative assessment on this particular lesson. I do try to vary the types, the assessment types. So although they've had kind of some more traditional assessments, formative assessments, I apologize. They've had like this air pressure and wind quiz, water and weather quiz, but now here in the air masses and changing weather, they'll get assessed on something that's a little different because it's being created through Gimkit Live, and they get excited when they see cards, that they created, and then they see it in assignments. So that can be really powerful. And then in the severe weather lesson, they'll be doing the performance task, which is visiting 8 different cities through these stations and making predictions about what kind of weather each of these 8 cities in the United States are going to be experiencing. So I try to change up the formative assessment types just to make sure that we're not doing the exact same thing all the time, and you really see different students shine in different applications. All right, next is a content-related discussion board. So here towards the end of the lessons, in the 4th lesson with severe weather, we do have a discussion board here that says understanding weather and climate. So in this discussion board, we're going to kind of see some intersectionality between science and social issues because I have asked them here to make a claim about whether they agree or disagree with a statement. The statement says, all citizens, regardless of profession or background, have a responsibility to be knowledgeable about weather and climate issues. I say that they need to support this claim. They need to give reasoning. They can't just say, yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. They have to support their claim one way or the other. And then I have a set 2 where they're going to comment on at least 2 other students, and I expect them to include at least one other student that they did not agree with, whoever took kind of the other side. And that way they can have an opportunity to kind of talk back and forth and see different perspectives on this idea. This is really important here towards the end of the weather unit because we will be soon transitioning into climate. And of course, in climate, we will be addressing human-caused climate change. And so I'm kind of priming them here to really start thinking about how these things affect culture, how they affect society, and what their place is. It also helps them understand why it is so important, in my view, that they become knowledgeable about weather and climate, even if they're not going to be scientists in the future. So in the course, I have included a variety of media. Of course, they're using several different Web 2.0 tools. We have things like Edpuzzle, we have Pear Deck flashcard vocabulary, we have Flipgrid, we have Google Slideshows, we have discussion boards, I have screencasts, I've used Edpuzzle, and they're looking at videos. We're using discussion boards as a collaborative tool. We use the Flipgrid to collaborate. We used EduFlow to collaborate, to peer review anonymously. Lots of different types of activities within the unit. So thank you for your time. Thank you for checking out my course, and I appreciate you. Have a great day.